Have you ever been through this? Your systems go dark. Ransomware has encrypted everything. Operations, customer data, critical infrastructure. The business is completely stopped. Now the forensics team arrives. They contain the threat, stop the bleeding, isolate the compromised systems. Everyone exhales. Big sigh of relief. Then someone asks a question that should have been asked months ago. Now what? How do we actually get back online? This is where overconfidence meets reality. You're asking, now what, for the very first time and discovering that you have no answer. I've seen organizations freeze at this very moment because they have backups somewhere, right? They may even have disaster recovery plans probably on a shelf, but the actual capability to rebuild a technology stack from a known good state in the right sequence with the right dependencies fast enough to matter, that's what's missing.
WWT presents Research.
I'm Rob Boyd, and this is Worldwide Technology Presents Research. And this is episode 2 in our series on the Cyber Resilience Maturity Model. In our first episode, Madison Horn and Rob Joyce laid out why traditional security approaches aren't enough anymore. And today, we're getting into the how, the messy, complicated reality of building restoration capability before you're staring at encrypted screens, wondering, where do I start? Angela Brandt is WWT's Director of Global Security Consulting. She works across healthcare, finance, and critical infrastructure, industries where downtime isn't just expensive, it's life-threatening. What she sees is a consistent pattern. Organizations that think they're prepared when they're not. WWT's research found that organizations at level 1 face a high risk of business disruption. A ransomware attack could halt operations entirely. Most organizations with backups assume that they've solved the problem, that they're resilient. But the research reveals that they're still actually at level 2, which is only one step above level 1. It means they still can't recover from targeted cyber attacks due to reliance on traditional disaster recovery and backup methods.
Understanding the gap between where you are from a risk posture and where you need or want to be. Depending on who you speak to within an organization, they're going to have different needs around this topic. Businesses are in business to deliver whatever it is they do to their customers and also create value for their shareholders and stakeholders, right? Like they want to grow, they want to continue to provide value. And so risk becomes a conversation that's associated with the ability of that entity to do what they do without interruption or without degradation.
That framing changes everything. Cyber resilience isn't a security problem, it's a business continuity problem. That means different people need to be in the conversation. Board members worried about enterprise risk. Security teams focused on threats, of course, and operations teams obsessed with uptime. Most organizations have invested in endpoint protection, firewalls, threat detection. Then ransomware gets through anyway. And they discover that all that spending didn't include a plan for what happens after containment.
Depending on who you're talking to, if you're talking to senior leadership, if you're talking to the board, if you're talking to folks at that topmost level, they're looking at risk through a lens of major business risk, enterprise risk. And there is a lot in that area to think about, cybersecurity being a component of the overall risk to an organization at that enterprise level.
Angela breaks risk down into 3 options. It's a simple framework that I think helps all of us think through this a bit more clearly.
You can accept it for what it is and just live with the fact that there will be consequences if there is a threat that actually leverages that risk and does damage to your business. So there's accepting the risk. There's transferring risk, which is associated often with the idea of insurance, where you're transferring through a financial means some of the risk outcomes. And then there's mitigating risk, which is just reducing it through implementing measures that bring the risk posture down.
Think of it like a flat tire. You avoid debris to mitigate the risk, and you carry a spare so that when that threat materializes, you can mitigate the impact. But you can't make those decisions strategically without understanding what you're actually protecting and what happens when it fails. And that understanding can't be a snapshot, can't be a moment in time. It has to be continuous.
Understanding how the risk to your organization is changing based on different threat profiles, new threat actors, new capabilities that those threat actors might have available to them now. AI is a great example in the cybersecurity space. Risk has changed because threat actors now have access to a tool that can enable them to move faster, more broadly, develop impacts that were not developed in the past. So the threats have changed, therefore the risk is also changing. And that type of risk analysis and risk posture understanding is a continuous type of work that needs to be taking place.
That's the reality. Not annual, not after an incident, continuous. And continuous assessment requires understanding what you're actually protecting. Angela approaches this by setting cybersecurity aside entirely and asking, hey, what processes do you need to keep your business alive?
You have to start with understanding what's at risk. And we often think about that through the lens of business impact analysis work, where we say, what are your most critical business activities? Set cybersecurity aside for a minute and let's talk about your business. What are the processes or functions in your business that are critical for you to deliver the thing that you do? Let's say you're a hospital. You're in the business of saving lives, and take away the whole hospital and just look at the emergency room as an example. That's not elective things, that's must-have things, right? Lives are at stake here. So in an emergency room scenario, what are the processes that you must have available to you to deliver those life-saving outcomes? What are the technologies that you're relying on to support those processes? And once you have that, you can then say, if these were impacted, what would I do?
You're not protecting infrastructure. You're protecting the ability to save lives. In the research, they call this your minimum viable business recovery threshold, or MVBR. Not what would be nice to have back, but what must we restore to keep people alive or to stop the revenue bleeding? That quantification transforms restoration from a technical project into a board-level business imperative.
Part of this conversation is not just what is impacted. So that's a business impact analysis, understanding the core processes and the functions and technologies that are necessary. But then we want to take another step that says, what if there's an impact, and how long can you go without this? And those combination of questions within the business, as complex as it all is, when you can distill it down to that type of conversation and those types of points, you can eliminate opinions. Everybody's going to have an opinion, but you can distill it down to the impact that it's going to have in a quantitative way. If we don't have this thing for this amount of time, lives are at risk. Or if we don't have this for this amount of time, we're going to lose X amount of revenue. These things can be quantified. And when you quantify them, you eliminate the opinions.
That transforms the boardroom conversation from we need better security to, hey, if this system is down for 48 hours, we lose $2 million in revenue. But business impact analysis also reveals hidden threads, your dependencies. You're not just restoring a patient record system, you're restoring the authentication services, database backends, the network segments that hold it all up. This mapping is what separates level 2 organizations from level 3. Level 2 has backups. Level 3 has documented restoration sequences that account for every dependency chain. This is where tabletop exercises stop being compliance theater and start becoming practical preparation.
Tabletop exercises are events where a scenario is illustrated. These are not real life events. These are sort of thought exercises where a scenario is presented. Usually they're very real life like scenarios where, organizations have suffered through these very events, these very types of events in the past. And you practice. Each person practices what they would do in their role, what they're accountable for the business. In a fire drill, you're taught a certain set of actions, right? If this happens, you have to go do that. And the reason we drill, the reason we practice is so that we don't have to think when that moment happens in real life, right? It's a safe space to do that kind of practicing. And that's what tabletop exercises are. They are practice events. You don't want to learn your way through a ransomware attack during a ransomware attack. You want to have practiced that. And everybody in your business has a role to play, from marketing to legal to your security folks in your SOC, everybody, to your senior executives who are going to work with PR firms.
The research emphasizes that at level 3, dependency mappings aren't just documented, they're evergreen, continuously updated as your environment changes. In a crisis, the technical bottleneck isn't usually the technology, it's the decision-making authority. You have to know who has the backing to make hard calls when the clock is ticking. It's a point, in fact, that Rob Joyce emphasized in our last session.
Who decides to shut us down, and will they have my backing at 2 a.m.? Have you talked through the authorities and the responsibilities and the decision levels? Are we going to pay a ransom? Who makes that decision in that call?
You can't answer these questions in the middle of a crisis if you haven't practiced them in the daylight. This preparation is a continuous process, a concept Angela correlates to the annual open enrollment period that we in the U.S. here all use for our health insurance.
Every year we have open enrollment, and we ask ourselves, do I have enough? What is my risk tolerance? You evaluate on an annual basis, and you make a new set of choices for yourself based on new information. Cybersecurity, exactly the same thing. Risk management, exactly the same thing. But at a business level, what is the health of my business? How much am I willing to pay out of pocket if something goes wrong?
That out-of-pocket analogy applies directly to restoration capability. How much are you willing to invest in preparation versus how much are you willing to lose when something goes wrong? Angela frames this as a timeline: prevention, detection, response, and finally restoration, which requires different capabilities entirely.
Restoration is what we can do when the worst happens, and having a plan in place that says, okay, I did everything I could to prevent this from happening, and I did everything I could to reduce the impact. It happened anyway. So now what do I do about it? How do I get back in business as fast as possible? How do I get my ER back online as fast as possible? How do I get the trains rolling again as fast as possible? Not just to serve my company and the revenue stream, but to serve my customers that are relying on me.
Once the forensic team contains the root cause, you're left with a trust gap. You need fresh technology that you know is uncompromised. So rebuilding identity is the critical first step in that journey.
Organizations that recovered understood something like pretty basic from a technical perspective, and that was that identity comes first. And they knew how to rebuild domain controllers, reestablish trust, and bring systems back online in a very, very controlled sequence.
Your Active Directory is probably going to be at the core of this because that's where your identity keys are. Identity comes first. That lesson is why research emphasizes a specific level 3 requirement, a tested, air-gapped cyber vault. Worldwide's Clean Room demonstrates this. It's a sterile environment where you can rebuild identity services and validate your data is clean before it touches production.
At a certain point, you're going to be left saying, great, the technology is untrustworthy. We can't say with assurance that they were able to actually remove the entire threat. So we need fresh technology that we know is not compromised. Your Active Directory is probably going to be at the core of this because that's where your identity keys are. So we need to rebuild Active Directory from the ground up.
The research emphasizes this explicitly. Strong identity and access management is critical for rapid organizational recovery. Without it, restoring core systems becomes significantly delayed and risk-prone.
Worldwide Technology is uniquely positioned to provide the planning, the analysis, the resilience assessments and recommendations, the resilience implementations. So everything up to the moment of a threat impact.
Emergency room versus intensive care. Forensic stops the bleeding. Worldwide Technology handles the rebuild. That partnership model is deliberate. WWT doesn't compete with forensic firms. They complement them.
We do not do forensics. We do not do incident response. We intentionally work with partners to be the incident responders.
Here's why that matters. Your incident response retainer doesn't include infrastructure restoration. Data is the material, but the plan is the bridge. You cannot architect your way out of a crisis in real time. This is why the research emphasizes testing your recovery processes before you need them.
The analogy here is there's been a major casualty, and the most important thing is to stop the bleeding. We are waiting for the ER doctors to stabilize the patient. And as soon as the patient is stable, now we come in, think of us as the ICU, and the patient is stable. The incident response team has seen to that. Now we need to get that patient back up and running.
That preparation compounds. When the incident happened, when, not if, that groundwork becomes the difference between measured restoration and chaotic scrambling.
You need good partners that can respond quickly. Do you have a plan for that? Do you have a plan for getting the tech quickly? Do you have backups? Have you taken the time to position yourself with all the right components, all the things that must be true, to restore the tech, the processes, the data that your business relies on?
Well, the research shows that being resilient on paper isn't enough. You have to be resilient in actual practice. That requires constant evaluation and testing of where you actually stand on the maturity continuum.
Best thing you can do as an organization is be as prepared as possible. And then if something goes wrong, those preparations that you made are expediting your ability to respond in the moment and then restore after you've stopped the bleeding.
Well, we opened with that, what do we do now? It's that scenario that every one of us keeps hoping we'll never actually experience.
Most organizations are resilient on paper and fragile in practice. And, these tabletop exercises and other things you can do, pen testing and red teaming, they show you some of the failure modes.
To close that gap, the research suggests 3 immediate steps to move from level 1 to level 2. First one, establish immutable offsite backups and deploy air-gapped cyber vault solutions. Number 2, develop and test cyber-specific disaster recovery plans. Define your MVBR thresholds. Try to say that fast. Step 3, implement MFA and RBAC for identity and access control across all critical systems. Yes, I'm oversimplifying all of this, of course. You need to read the source document. Worldwide Technology has been documenting their learned experiences for years now. The research provides the roadmap. Worldwide Technology provides the expertise to implement it. The alternative is that terrifying prospect of trying to figure these things out when your business is already down, can't get to any of your favorite tools, and everyone's just looking at you for answers, and that clock is ticking. In fact, I think it's already ticking. I'm Rob Boyd. The complete Cyber Resilience Maturity Model research is available at WWT.com. Start with step 1, then build from there. Thanks for watching. Worldwide Technology presents Research.
This episode is supported by Tanium. Tanium provides real-time endpoint management and security to protect enterprise assets. Gain control and visibility with Tanium's unified endpoint platform.